Well, here we are, another episode of the Line Podcast. We are talking about Mark Carney desperately needing some comms help, and we have a volunteer. Pierre goes to Europe, and interesting things happen. And then we're going to narrate a Globe and Mail column, and Jen is going to laugh at it. It's the Line Podcast.
Today's episode of the Line Podcast is brought to you by Engage, the new door-to-door canvassing app from Geppetto Technologies. Engage makes it effortless to go knock doors and connect with your community. With a fragmented media landscape, endless spam phone calls, and social media echo chambers, the best way to reach people is at their doorstep. The Engage app makes it happen. Your canvassers will be ready to go in seconds using Engage's user-friendly interface. We seamlessly connect with your campaign's digital infrastructure to help you collect valuable data. Quickly track support, volunteers, signs, and issues to set up a stronger get-out-the-vote effort. With upcoming municipal elections in BC and Ontario, there's no better time to get started with Engage. Made in Canada, built and supported by experienced campaigners. Ready for a winning ground game? Visit GoKnockDoors.ca for your demo. That's GoKnockDoors.ca.
Jennifer Gerson, here we are, as beautiful as the day I met you. And you know I'm serious when I go full Jennifer.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So you are polishing up your resume. You've kind of had enough of this journalism thing. You're looking at moving on up in the world. Where are you thinking you'd like to land?
Well, who else would have me, Matt? Come on now. Who else would have me? Look, we're speaking in jest because Mark Carney's had a bad week. Mark Carney's had an extremely bad comms week, right in the middle of World War III. So inconvenient timing to be having a meltdown is what I would say. Matt, would you like to set us up here? Tell us what's going on in the world and tell us how the Canadians have responded to it.
Okay, let me actually, for a minute, I'm going to be serious, and then I'm going to get existentially goofy, just because
everything is very serious right now. Everything is...
The war between the U.S. and Israel and Iran has become very interesting. And I'm seeing a lot of people throwing around terms like World War III, and it's not quite that. But it's now big and serious enough that I don't really know if we have a term to describe it. Like,
Bommageddon?
I mean,
Flashy?
Israel killed the Ayatollah, and then the religious clerics got together to elect a new Ayatollah, and Israel blew that up too. The Iranians are raining ballistic missiles all across the region. You've probably seen this. Gas prices, oil prices are way up because the oil infrastructure has been bombed or been threatened. The U.S. is trying to figure out how to get energy flowing through the Strait of Hormuz because Lloyd's of London vetoed all the insurance policies, and the U.S. is trying to figure out what to do about that now. You know, I'm not convinced the Americans really had the slightest idea what they were doing when they started this. As always, it's tactically brilliant, and I have no idea what the strategy is.
Right.
The Israelis, meanwhile, they're getting what they want. They're knocking back Iran's power 30 years, and that's going to buy them 30 years of peace. Like, the Israelis don't think about 100 years from now. They're trying to survive tomorrow. So this is working for them. This is a large, serious regional conflict that is unfolding while Ukraine continues, and this is going to be dividing Western munitions. China is looking at this right now, and they're going, on the one hand, the U.S. fleet and Air Force are very, very busy. On the other hand, their weapons are really good, and they're kicking the shit out of the Russian and Chinese stuff the Iranians were using. So it's a mixed bag. This is just absolute geopolitical chaos, and it's dangerous. It's scary. And this is where I just start laughing, because in the middle of it, the Canadian government is twisting in the wind, trying to come up with an omniposition that accomplishes... I don't know how to describe this. Are they trying to accomplish everything at once or nothing at all?
I think that a conversation about what we're trying to accomplish, this is how you start this press release. And I think that there's as much thought going into Canadian comms on Iran as there was American strategic planning into World War III.
So let's kind of start with the beginning. I'm actually going to start it in a place.
And I'm not even sure who comes off worse in that comparison.
I'm not even going to start with Iran. I'm going to show everybody how well read I am.
Okay.
So I actually think the comms incoherence begins about a week before the war.
Okay.
With the India trip. So India trip is just an absolutely cursed phrase in Canadian political lexicon. Like sooner or later, a Canadian prime minister is going to need to travel to India and just have everything go fine. And then come home.
It honestly, this India trip was better than the last prime minister's India trip. Okay.
But just you and I, are going to be at the old columnist home one day doing trivia night, and someone's going to be like, "This prime minister was notorious for a failed India trip in the early part of the 21st century." And you and I are going to put our hands up and go, "That's a bullshit question. Come on, that's a trick question."
Can you imagine the old columnist home? What a riot that's going to be on the day.
It's going to be a very small home. There's going to be
when they send us out to pasture with the nice new nurses.
No one ever visits us. So it started with a background briefing, and we were not at it, but we read the coverage about it. Most of the big Ottawa orgs were there, where a Canadian official who was unnamed, I could probably figure out who it was if I asked, but I haven't bothered. Someone comes out and tells the press corps in Ottawa that Canada believes India's interference and criminal activities in Canada have ended. That this is part of the reason why Mark Carney feels comfortable going to India for like a trade relationship reset trip. And again, this person can't be named, but the quote was pretty blunt. It was like, if we thought the Indians were still up to their nonsense, we wouldn't be going on the trip.
Sure.
And then it was Chris Nards, my beloved, former intern who's now like a senior reporter. Blows my mind. But anyway,
We're old now, Matt.
What's that?
We're so old now.
Yeah, I know.
How have we survived in this industry for so long? I have no idea.
The old columnist home isn't a completely abstract thought for us anymore. But Nards goes and he talks to CSIS and basically goes, "Do you agree with this assessment?" And CSIS, on the record, goes, "No. We believe that India continues to be one of the leading," I don't remember the exact quote, but basically they continue to do bad things.
And I think there was even a former CSIS boss who actually went on like CTV or something like that. It was like, yeah, no, they're still fucking around.
And then the prime minister in India and then a foreign affairs minister, Anita Anand, also in India, kind of spend the next couple of days kind of doing like increasingly acrobatic contortions to not talk about this. And like the press gallery on CanForce One was getting pissy with the prime minister because he kept canceling his media availability. Like these people got on a plane and flew literally halfway around the world, and the prime minister didn't want to answer any questions.
Yeah, it's like, what do you think? They're not following you around for their health here, guys. Like,
or the TV dinners on the plane.
Or the TV dinners on the plane. What are we doing?
That's when I started to go, we got a problem here. And then the Iran war starts. And the prime minister comes out with his statement like, "We support the United States. Israel has a right to defend itself." And people go, "Wow, bold statement, supporting America." Then a couple of days later, the prime minister's like, "Yes, we support it, but reluctantly, because it's..."
Or with regret.
With regret, with regret. Because it's another sign of the decaying world order. And then he's asked, "Will you categorically rule out getting involved?" And he goes, "No. I won't categorically rule it out." In fairness to him, his answer actually was correct because he basically was saying, we're going to have to see how things go. We have allies in the region. We could get pulled into it. I understand that, but basically we went from we support it to we support it with regret to we might end up in the war in like 3 days.
And like, here's the problem when you have someone who is a bit of a high resolution thinker, which I think that Carney is that he's trying to present a nuanced position, but he doesn't understand how to present that in a way that's going to translate appropriately. So like when I go through and I parse through everything he said, it makes sense to me. But then I understand how people received what he said, and it looks like an incoherent babble that it has no consistent through line. And here's, I think, the thing that I would observe from the prime minister's office is that they're running into exactly the same problem that they ran into with the Trudeau era, and that is these guys don't know how to thread a needle. And the problem that I have with this and why it's driving me insane is like, it's not hard to thread these needles. You're just bad at it. Like, it's not hard. Firstly, one, don't lie. Never lie. Don't put someone up on a stage and have them say that India's not effing around if in fact they're still effing around. You can't get away with that. You'll never get away with that. So that's your first problem. Secondly, it's not hard to say, look, we have significant concerns about India's chosen interference into Canadian affairs, but we have a much better chance of helping to dissuade that and be part of the conversation if India is part of our diplomatic efforts, as opposed to if we're not talking to each other, or if we're on opposite sides of a tent. Like, there's a way to thread that needle and make it coherent and palatable to people, but they're just bad at it. Same thing with Iran. Like, I read the Prime Minister's first statement on Iran. Firstly, I didn't think it was good because it buried the lead. This is a really easy one to do, guys. It's we unequivocally support the overthrowing of the despotic mullahs who have harmed their own people for generations. However, we also have significant concerns about the Americans' lack of multilateralism, consultation with other nations, and lack of clear and stated strategic objective. Like, there's your top line. It's right there. It has to be at the front of your press statement, and then all of your responses have to feed into that. But I don't know why these guys. You know what? When I read the statement, I know exactly what's happened. I see comms by committee. I see checklist. I see lack of sort of what I would say internal moral clarity on the issue at hand, and I see an attempt to please everyone all at once. That's what I'm seeing in these comms teams, which is straight out of Trudeau era communications policy, and insanely frustrating to deal with.
I hear you, and I think I mostly agree with that. I articulated it a bit differently, but I think we're in the ballpark. What I had said was that it seems to me like the thing about the Trudeau guys is that even when they had an opportunity to give a really straight, honest answer, they wouldn't.
Right.
The Trudeau guys kind of almost reflexively preferred to not give straight answers. And I don't even think it was always dishonest or evasive. I think they had taken message discipline to such a level that an answer that did not drive home some other liberal message was considered a failure.
Yeah.
So even if they had an opportunity to answer the question straight, if they did it, but they didn't also talk about like the school food program or like the middle class or, you know, maternal health care, then they would felt like it was a lost opportunity. So their kind of prime directive in terms of communicating was to never just answer a question. It was to use the opportunity of a question to make a point, maybe not even a related point. The Carney guys, I think, are having a different problem, which is Carney goes to Davos, gives his sign in the window speech, and everybody loves it. On Iran and on India, he cannot communicate straight. And I think the problem they're running into here is that as long as they're saying something they're confident Canadian people on balance are going to want to hear, they are prepared to communicate bluntly and plainly, which is a welcome change of pace from Trudeau. But the moment they start getting into you can't please everyone, competing domestic interests, they don't know what to do.
Well, but the end result is then they please no one.
Yeah. And I actually think, like, here I am, the columnist, heading off to the old columnist home soon, I hope. I can actually answer these questions bluntly. What is our position on India? We hate that we have to deal with these guys, but we do because the Americans have gone apeshit, and we're going to have to throw some of our own diaspora communities under the bus in order to reboot the economy. And it's awkward. Please stop asking us about it. That's the honest Canadian federal.
There's perhaps a more polished version of that could probably hit the table. That's not maybe what they would start with.
But that's the truth of it.
But that's the truth of it. And
on the Iran thing, the actual honest Canadian position is that we fucking love watching the Ayatollah get blown up because he was a prick, and we hate these guys, and they deserve everything they're getting. But we don't want to line ourselves up with Israel because that's politically awkward, and we don't trust the Americans not to fuck it up. That's the honest Canadian position again. But they can't say that. I can say that. They can't.
Yes, but
So what we get is just word salad.
But they could be saying some version of that would be palatable to people. And like, here's the thing. I think that most Canadians are actually pretty smart. And I think that most Canadians understand that we're in a complicated situation and we're going to have to operate in more gray zones than we are normally comfortable operating in. And I think that the Carney in the Prime Minister's office gets a lot of latitude for that, right?
Yep.
But you can't operate in those gray zones if you're trying to be too cute by half. You kind of have to just be straight and honest with people about it. And you can't really out communicate people on this stuff. And that's what they're trying to do. And it doesn't land. It doesn't quite work. As I said, I think that we're in a complicated world and threading some of these needles in an effective and clear way isn't actually as hard as they're making it for themselves.
Yeah.
But I also wonder, and I don't know what the answer to this question is, how much of this is Carney actually micromanaging his own communications?
I don't know that.
I don't know the answer to the question, because I think what you might have here is someone who's navigating a complicated space. Carney is actually very, very intelligent person. I don't dispute that. But he's not good at everything, because he can't be good at everything, right? He doesn't necessarily have the mass media communications chops to be able to micromanage his own statements if that's what he's doing. Nor is he necessarily the best equipped to say, you know what, this statement doesn't land. Right? So if you have a Trudeau-era comms team that's doing shit by committee using all the same old habits of the past, and you've got a really smart guy who's the smartest guy in the room being like, well, yes, this high-resolution sort of take more or less aligns with my viewpoints, I just think it's a slow-motion disaster in the making. So, look, I just think, I mean, you and I have made this point before. It's time to blow more of the Trudeau-era people out and bring more blood in.
I should probably know this better than I do, but the last few months I've been kind of distracted and I haven't paid as much attention to the PMO as I should have. I don't know how much of the comms team is the same, but I mean, even if it's not, a point you and I have made before is like the Trudeau people, a lot of them are gone, but I still think there's Trudeau inertia.
Yeah, there's habits. There's old habits
of thought, habits of being.
And I think also, look, a guy who's as far ahead in the polls as Carney is, has the luxury of being blunter and expressing a higher degree of moral clarity, I would say, than someone who is just hanging on by the skin of his teeth. Like, Carney actually has the luxury of saying, let's blow up the Ayatollah, that's great, Israel has a right to defend itself, but we have real issues with what the Americans are doing. And as I said, the lack of stated strategic outcome isn't clear to us. I think that he's got an ability to do that right now that he may not have in 10 years' time. I mean, who knows? But they're still kind of doing this.
Oh, we're thinking we'll still be here in 10 years. Now look at you, the optimist.
Well, I said it on Twitter the other day that I'm going to go long on Optimist because it manufactures more conflict on this podcast, and people love that. Anyway, it's bad, and I think that they need to fix some things on that front, because I do think it undermines our ability to function effectively in the world if people don't feel like they can get a straight answer from you on complicated issues.
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't think anyone would deny that. I also think one of the things that I have found most dispiriting about Carney so far, and credit where it's due, I like some of what he's doing. I really do. Carney is closest to a liberal that I could vote for that I've ever seen in my life. Mm-hmm. Don't know if I'm there yet, but he is closest. And my greatest disappointments in him over the last year have been when I feel like he has chosen the path of least resistance and just kind of did what Trudeau would do.
Gun buyback.
And what's that?
Gun buyback.
That's an easy example. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where I have to believe, based on everything I know about Carney, that he understands that it's an incredibly stupid idea. Remember I was joking with you about this a couple months ago? Like, the most damning criticism of the gun buyback program I've ever heard was the surreptitious, how to pronounce that? The sneaky videotape of the public safety minister talking about his own goddamn program. It was the most scathing indictment. Like, if I had written exactly what the public safety minister said about the program, the old Trudeau era TrueAnon guys would have lost it on me for being unfair. It's a stupid program, but they went along with it. Meanwhile, we've got a new war in the Middle East, a really dangerous one. And the response is, Trudeau word salad, Trudeau word salad. There was a line, and I shouldn't laugh at this. Like, I really shouldn't laugh at this, but I did. There's a line in the original Canadian statement from Carney on the new war. And the line is, I think I'm quoting it verbatim, and if I'm not, I'm close. It's like, Israel has a right to defend itself. Or it might have been, we recognize Israel's right to self-defense or something like that.
We used to put that on coffee cups at the National Post.
We did.
Wonderful thought-terminating cliche. It's fantastic.
We actually used to use it as often as we could as a headline, and when we did, we would take a picture of it and send it to the group chat. So, hey, look, we get to use it again. But whatever the phrase was, I agree Israel has a right to defend itself. And I actually completely agree that going out and taking out the Ayatollah certainly qualifies as self-defense because Iran's been after Israel for 40 years. But
and not just Israel.
Sticking it into statement the way they did, I was joking with Jen. It was like they had some like digital whiteboard where they were like looking at little stickies, digital stickies, and going, we got to bring in this talking point and this talking point and this talking point. And you're kind of assembling a statement out of talking points. And then you put it into an AI or you get like some comms intern to sort of add the connective tissue of sentences that link all the talking points together. But for some reason, they just forgot to do it with the Israel one. So you were just left with this point form note where it was like statement, 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 bullet, Israel right to self-defense, good. And then the statement resumed. They ticked the box in the most box-ticky way possible.
It read like 5 intelligent liberals were in a room debating about what their position on this was. And then they basically took a verbatim note of their debate and they put it in a statement. That's what it read like.
Yeah, and forgot to edit it.
And then forgot to edit it. It's like, dude, your leads in the penultimate paragraph. Yeah, your leads in the penultimate paragraph, and it ain't punchy enough. And like, I don't know, maybe you and I have just been editors long enough that we know how often it is that people put their leads in the penultimate paragraph, so we just kind of go right there. Anyway, bit of a train wreck. Sorry. We were hard on Pierre last week. This week, it's Carney's turn.
One of the things I genuinely find frustrating, like I said a minute ago, it's when he does the Trudeau era stuff that I get pissy. But I also think he's going to piss some of our listeners off, but I'm going to be honest here. I think the good liberals are back.
Yeah.
Like I think the faction of the Liberal Party I can actually work with seems to be ascendant right now. But I need them to be better.
Just
because I think they get it.
Step it up.
I
do.
I think Carney's big picture assessment of what's going on is basically correct. If you stuck Carney and I in a room somewhere, and he probably finds that prospect less appealing than I do, because I think that would be really interesting. For him, that probably sounds awful. But if you locked him and I in a room together with a 2-4 beer, I don't think we would disagree on that much about kind of the big picture geopolitical stuff. And then he goes out and gives these statements. And I think you could be right, Jen, to an extent. He might be reaching for a degree of nuance. And people always say,
it's just not translating, is all I'm saying.
Nuanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the nuance has to, but the nuance has to hit. Right. And that's where I think he kind of gets lost in the big picture. That being said, I don't want to necessarily over index to comms here because it's easy for us. He had a good trip to Australia. He spoke to the Australian Parliament.
The speech was today's in Japan.
Yeah, he's in Japan today. To be honest with you, I thought his speech in Australia was not as punchy as it could have been, but okay, cool. Clearly, the Australians love him. They signed a critical minerals.
Speech, not high stakes. Like that's going to be a warm audience.
Yeah, that's a warm audience, absolutely, and that's great. And it looks like we've signed a critical minerals deal with Australia. I haven't had a chance to pore over that, but cool, great. I like that we're doing stuff. And also, I think that to some extent, the Conservatives under-index to the importance of relationship building with other types of powers.
We'll talk about that next, but yeah.
Yeah. Everything he's doing here is positive, even if it's not concrete. one of the criticisms that we talked about in Carney here is that, yes, okay, you've got the right big picture idea. Why are we a year into this term and things aren't moving faster? Why, when the pipeline, okay, you've signed an MOU, great. Where is the pipeline? You've talked about interprovincial trade. What material has changed on interprovincial trade? We talked about even internal cultural cues. I don't think that the ship of state's moving fast enough on a lot of that stuff. I'm seeing signs of it. It's happening. It's just happening really slowly. And I think that criticism is largely valid. What I think that where the Conservatives more or less lose the plot on the criticism is the assumption that nothing's getting done and that none of these junkets or none of these circuits or none of this relationship building is going to pay off for Canada in the long run. I'm not sure that that's true. I think that in the current environment, it makes a lot of sense for Carney to be seen as a world leader on the middle power stage. That gives us an enormous amount of leverage and currency that we can then trade into other types of trade agreements and geopolitical agreements. It's just that a lot of the benefits aren't necessarily going to be seen in the next 6 weeks, right? Or even in the next year. Look, it took us 10 years to totally bork our position on the geopolitical stage. Yeah. It's going to take a couple years for us to dig ourselves back out.
All right. I have a comment and I have a question.
Okay.
Comment. Canada is actually, in theory, well positioned to be an effective middle power.
In theory.
We've got the right stuff.
Right.
And, middle power is sort of a term we need to kind of maybe think about for a minute, because it kind of used to be like superpowers, middle powers, useless powers. Canada is not a France. Canada is not a Britain. But I think kind of the superpowers right now are probably U.S. and China. Then there's probably the great powers. I don't think we're a great power, but we could be kind of top tier middle power because we've got the economics, we've got the population, we've got the technology. We just don't use any of them correctly. And I actually would like to see. You and I used to talk about asshole Canada, but one of the other terms we kicked around was maximum Canada. The idea of get Canada operating at the maximum extent of its capabilities. That would be good enough. That's all I would ask of Carney, or at least get us moving in that direction.
Yes, an absolute revolution that maximized Canada's productivity and talent on the world stage. That's all. That's all we're asking here. Is that so much? Is that so much?
Apparently. Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
And this is going to sound needy and insecure. And if you want to give me a hug, I won't turn it down. But I'm actually asking the question with intellectual, not emotional need. I was out ahead earlier than you on the Carney's talking a lot about the right things, but he's not delivering. Mm-hmm. You were the more patient one. Mm-hmm. Where are you today? Because for me, looking back to where I was 6 months ago, I think I had it right.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Like I said, I think that the critique that the Conservatives and yourself have leveled against Carney about the lack of actual movement domestically is still a valid critique. I guess I have some respect, as much as I can have a respect as a yappy outsider to how these processes actually work, that actually moving a ship of state absent an existential and imminent threat is really, really hard. Having leaders recognize the problems and make us feel like we're not being constantly gaslit for pointing the problems out goes a long way with me. And I'm also, my expectations, I think, are perhaps more sanely set than yours, in that I think there are some of these problems we can't fix. I think there are just some problems we can't fix, or very unlikely, or we don't have the bandwidth to fix. One of the things that like I said, I don't want to necessarily talk about what I think I see happening behind the scenes, because that's not my place to do so. But I am seeing movement. I am seeing indications of good signs. I am seeing a coalescing of a kind of a national identity. I am seeing widespread shared understanding that things need to change and we need to get much better, much smarter, much faster. That goes a long way for me in terms of bolstering my personal optimism for Canada in the medium term. If I still saw, for example, the same internally divisive pitting region off of the other pipeline politics that I saw 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, in the current geopolitical environment, I would be in a state of total and absolute despair. Now, I am still in a state of total and absolute despair on occasion. I'm not above despair. That black dog hits me sometimes. But if you were to tell me 7 years ago that there would be supermajority support for pipelines in British Columbia in 2026, I wouldn't have believed that was possible. So
Just a few days ago, Ontario and Nova Scotia signed an accord to permit direct retail of each other's alcohol products.
yeah.
I was so happy to see that. And
We'll
then
take every win we can get. God damn
then
it.
right behind that was the crushing sadness when I realized how happy I was to see that. And then there was this statement this week, and I haven't even read it yet. It's one of the 38 tabs I have open right now, which is why my computer barely works. But Ontario is talking about like a utilities corridor, and it's trying to line up other provinces to kind of figure out how to do this. And I'm glad to see it. But I'm sad that I'm glad. And also, why is Ontario doing this? Like, why do we have to be the ones to go and wrangle the provinces? Like, why do we have a federal government? Why is Papa Province having to do it?
Look, the lack of faith in federalism. I'm not going to get into Alberta here. I've spoken way too much about Alberta here. I can't do it. I'm too traumatized. I'm taking a week off. Look, one of the big problems that came out of the pipeline politics era of Canadian politics was the degradation of the importance of federalism. And by that I meant an increasingly internal squabbling, internecine, we're going to turn BC against Alberta, and we're going to turn Quebec against Alberta, and we're going to turn BC against Quebec, and we're going to turn the Maritime Province against these guys. And that mentality was just killing us, right? That mentality of it's one, we're not one Canada, and we don't all benefit equally, right? To see one region succeed comes at the expense of the other. We're engaged in a zero-sum game. And that is corrosive. That's just poison to any kind of national interest. So one of the benefits that I've seen, or one of the reasons why I guess I'm open to optimism, if not fully on board with the optimism train, is the Americans have helped us clarify a lot of that sensibility.
You said something interesting.
It matters. And I'm sorry, but it does matter. It matters that that's true.
Yeah, but you had said something interesting a few minutes ago where you had said, like, you were encouraged to see some progress because progress comes slowly outside of the context of an existential threat. I just thought that was interesting because I'm not sure we're outside that context.
Oh, the threat's not existential yet, right? Like we're not panicked enough yet. You and I have also decided to take differing positions on our optimism about the state of America and where things are going, and I think that that's healthy for the podcast. One of us should be a doomer, and one of us should be an optimist, and we should test each other's assumptions off of one another.
The problem is, I don't think you and I are that far apart. I just think I think we have the same views. I think our leaderboards just shuffled differently.
Yeah, our leaderboard shuffled, but that's fine. There's some manufactured content is good for us. Or some manufactured conflict is good for us, I would say. But no, we haven't reached existential threat with America yet, and we might. Right? All we can do is set the ground game for that possibility. So, I don't know. Yeah, as I said, we're kind of in rambly territory now, and I think we have other things to talk about. We want to talk about Pierre Poilievre doing the European tour. What else? How should we wrap up this segment, Matt?
With smiles.
Smiles and cheer.
Like and subscribe. Pierre Poilievre, Conservative leader, Jen, has been in Europe this week. I read the British press. Like, the British papers are part of my morning shell-shocked WTF, oh my God, news scroll. You got to stay informed in this business, and I read papers from all over the place, and he didn't get a ton of attention, but he got some attention, and obviously got more attention here in Canada. I thought his speeches were fine, and I thought everything he said made sense. Before we get too much into the Poilievre thing, what do you think of the CanZuck idea? Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. It's an idea that pops up every couple of years, some sort of, probably not a full federation, but some sort of tighter association between those four countries. I've always
Commonwealth
loved the
version 2,
idea.
right? Commonwealth
Pardon me?
version 2. Commonwealth version 2.
Yeah, or like top tier Commonwealth, where the Aussies, the Kiwis, the Canucks, and the Brits all kind of get together in some way. And there's different versions of it. So Polyev was endorsing a version of this. He wanted like more trade, recognition of each other's credentials, enhanced travel options. But one of the things I thought this was interesting. One of the things that normally is on the Kanzuk list is freedom of movement, EU style freedom of movement, where a Canadian, a Brit, an Aussie, or a New Zealander could live, work, and reside on an equal basis in any of those countries. Polyev left that off. I thought that was interesting because it's kind of the big idea of the normal Kanzuk adherence.
It is the big idea of Kanzuk and always has been. I don't know why he would leave that off except for fear that the young people would flee to Australia because it's warmer there. Look, the credentials
he just doesn't want to pick an immigration fight.
Oh, yes, that's the other one, right? Not that I would be necessarily worried about our shores being inundated by New Zealanders and Australians. I'm not sure that is necessarily the highest risk outcome here. The credentials one's very interesting because, as we know, here in Canada, we don't have recognized credentials across provincial borders. So how are we going to? We would need to do that first, and that would mean sapping some powers away from the provinces and embracing a much more robust form of federalism. Good luck with that.
Like I said in the last segment, Ontario and Nova Scotia just figured out booze. But sure, let's go recognize an Australian orthodontist.
Sure, but I mean that is an us problem, right? That is actually not a them problem. I think I'm all for Kanzuk in theory. I can't imagine why we would be opposed to greater free trade, particularly with countries that share so much history and value, right? The concern that I just have with it is it's not in and of itself, it's not enough, and also, which I don't think anybody's assuming that it would be, the geography matters. Geography matters a lot. Shipping costs money. Shipping in an era when the Pax Americana is degrading is going to cost more money. New Zealand, I'm going to make very, very obvious, very, very trenchant geopolitical analysis here. Yeah, New Zealand and Australia are very far away. There we go. That's your top line from Jen Gerson today. So
this is why people subscribe to the line.
So look, I'm not opposed to it. I'm not opposed to it. It just, a lot of Pierre's policies here are like Carney and the people who are currently running the PMO. I think that's Pierre Polyev. Sorry. I think that Pierre has a very good idea of what the problems are. He's got a really trenchant sense of what exactly is going wrong in the country. The problem that I consistently have with him is that you are identifying problems correctly. He then catastrophizes those problems into all-encompassing problems. And then the solutions that he proposes are tangential or orthogonal to the issues. So he did a podcast on trigonometry, which I occasionally listen to, and it's an interesting podcast. But he talked about some of the things that we talk.
Listen to, but I listened to that.
Yeah, so he talked about some of the problems that you and I have identified, and that is Canada's octopus economy. The fact that this is a country that has a tendency to reallocate government funds toward well-connected industries and people, right? That is a well-established problem here in Canada. It hugely hampers our productivity. We've created very much a rent-seeking economy. I think that it is valid to point that out. But he takes that critique and says all of Canada is fundamentally aligned against all working class. All Canada is fundamentally aligned against all working class people. So he turns this into, a nuanced critique of Canadian economic policy, and he turns it into this conspiratorial class warfare conversation, right? And I'm like, no, I think really what's just happening is that you've got too many lobbyists in Ottawa with deep hooks inside the Canadian government who are operating in their own self-interest. I don't think that it is a conspiracy to undermine the working class plumber in Saskatchewan, right? It's not that. And then, of course, what's his solution to fixing the problems that he's now identified as these existential systemic issues in the country? Well, we're going to recognize credentials between New Zealand and Australia, right? Like the fixes that he proposes are incremental and too small for the systemic critiques that he's making. So I see that a lot with Pierre. The other thing that I would note in Pierre, and again, I know I've been hard on Pierre the last few weeks. I always can tell that when the Conservatives start to give me the silent treatment. They're going to give me the silent treatment for another 2 weeks. I'm sorry.
Who were you?
Poor me. Poor me. Pierre's latest rebranding, we talked about his Trump speech last week when he started quoting Marcus Aurelius, which I thought was an interesting clap back to Carney's name dropping Thucydides and Vaclav Havel. Vaclav?
Sign in the window. Yep.
Sign in the window. But this is like Pierre's third rebrand now. And every time that he rebrands, he's rebranding latest thing in tech bro culture. So when he moved into opposition leader, he went crypto bro. And then after he'd been crypto bro for a while, he moved into fitness bro. And now he's moving into stoicism bro. Right? Like, I don't have an issue against stoics or stoicism. But why is it that this guy's rebranding is always centralized around what a very particular kind of masculine ideal in tech bro culture is lionizing at the moment? I like Pierre when he's at his most authentic self. Pierre at his most authentic self is a bulldog who likes to fight. You know, he's that. He's not a stoic. I don't know what to do. The guy who wants to defund the CBC because Rosemary Barton sued the Conservative Party does not play well with stoicism to me. That is not a compatible branding. You know, I don't buy it. I don't buy this as real from him.
I think this latest version, and I hear you, I'm with you. I do think this latest version of him on policies is actually fairly authentic. And one of the interesting things about Poilievre is if you actually look, and God, I mean, we keep joking about how old we are. My career as a journalist largely overlaps with his as a politician. And I think he's got a couple years on me in terms of the start of his career versus mine, but it's pretty close. Him flying to the UK to talk about CANZUK and lionize Winston Churchill and talk about tariff-free trade between like-minded democracies, that's pretty hip.
Yeah, that's legit.
But I'm with you that he's still trying to figure out how to package it. And you mentioned the Trigonometry podcast. He also did Mansbridge. And
good. Start doing more podcasts like that. He did really well on Mansbridge.
I think it was so I listened to the Trigonometry one and I listened to the Mansbridge one, and now I can't remember which one it was from.
Which one was what? Yeah.
Either of them. You might remember. If you do, tell me. He was asked about the fact that he is now talking to more outlets, and he basically said, yeah, there was a time when our strategy was to really kind of narrowly communicate to one segment, but we've decided to broaden that out. And I'll talk to anyone now. I actually think that is more him.
Yes.
And one of the things that you and I talked about last year, even when it still looked like he was about to win, was the fact that, and I'm not trying to lionize the guy, because believe me, I have concerns with Pierre Poilievre. But one of the things, and I can say this to him with total sincerity, and is that I think he's pretty politically consistent. I think his big picture political values aren't that incompatible with mine. And I think he is smarter than he has let on. I think he, over the last couple of years, keeps trying to create a winnable political personality. And I don't think the policy drifts, but I think the presentation does. And I think you're right. I think that starts to run into an authenticity problem. But I also think, and this is me again just being frustrated, Jen's my therapist for the next minute, not my co-host. Jen, this is exactly what me, you, and others were telling him he needed to be doing about 15 months ago.
More. Look, he's 4 years in as leader, and this is his first overseas trip? Like, by all means, go build coalitions with other conservative leaders in Commonwealth countries. That's smart. You should be doing that. You should have been doing that years ago. What are
Why
we
do you and
doing
I have better
here?
European sources than the leader of the Canadian opposition?
Like what?
I
What are
don't
we?
have a good one.
What are we doing here, man? Anyway,
Worth mentioning, and look, I'm not here to flog a dead horse. I swear to God, I'm not. And actually, between the two of us, I think I'm more positive and cheerful on Polyev these days than you are, because I don't know if it's going to work. In fact, I suspect it might be too late, but he is doing the right things. But I don't
you
know
can
if
come
you've
on,
been paying much attention.
come on the
Polls are
line,
polls.
Pierre. You can take your pick. Matt or me.
Yeah.
Come on the line. We'll chat with you. But he's at his best and his most authentic self when he's actually going into spaces that challenge him, and then he rises to those challenges. That's why his narrowcasting media strategy was such a disaster during the election, because he's actually strongest not when he's surrounded by people who, fluff him. He's actually strongest when he's around people who give him shit. And then he's like, all right, I'll give you shit and I'll give you shit right back. That is him. And I think that's a side of him that people connect with positively.
Fluffing Pierre will not be the headline of this podcast.
You were tempted, though. Admit it. You were tempted.
First, for a moment, yeah, but I think if we did that, we would be just as guilty of narrowcasting to an audience. Yeah, I think that's true. But also, I'm just looking at the polls, and I looked at one of the seat aggregators a day or two ago. And look, there's no election imminent. Like, these polls don't matter that much, so I don't want people to think I'm overstating them here. But the Liberal seat map right now looks like what Poilievre's did 2 years ago, like 250 seat majority.
Yeah.
And I'm honestly curious, and no snark, I'm saying this sincerely, I'm honestly curious how long new Pierre or Pierre 3.0 or whatever version code we're up to is going to show up in Britain and toast Churchill and talk about Kanzuk and do the Mansbridge podcast while his numbers are sliding. Because I actually don't think the Liberals are overperforming these days. Jen and I spent an entire first segment talking about the ways the Liberals are annoying us here. But the Conservatives have just lost it. Like, one of the fascinating things about the last election was that Conservative support basically held. It was that Carney surged and gobbled up a bunch of NDP votes, and that was Carney won despite the Conservatives putting up their best ever performance. Poilievre got more votes than Harper ever did. Harper won a majority. But the Liberals did better. The Conservative vote held, and it's falling. They're losing it. And I don't know if that's because red Tories are drifting to Carney. There's no evidence of that. The Liberal numbers aren't surging. They're holding. I mean, they're up a bit, but they're pretty stable.
I think there's actually quite a bit of anecdotal evidence from at least where I'm standing that the red Tories are going to Carney. So, and I think there's actually just, again, this is anecdotal, that there's a lot of concern with Pierre's tone and approach. And there's also concern with some of his policy approaches as well. Even among people who would generally agree with some of his desires. Like I don't think there's even necessarily disagreement that Canada's productivity is a problem, or that Canada's octopus economy is a problem, or that Canada's housing issues are a problem. But I will go back to what I said last week. If we're all in agreement that these are the problems, and we're all in agreement that they need to be fixed, the question just starts to be one of, okay, well, who's best equipped to fix them? Right? And who gives me the better feeling while they're doing it? And here's where I, again, go back to critiquing Pierre from last week. Feelings matter. How people feel about you inside their heart holes matters. And if they look at Carney and they're just like, yeah, that statement was really annoying about Iran, but like, he gives me technocratic daddy vibes and I feel like we can trust him. And they're looking at Pierre and they're being like, yeah, Pierre successfully identified the problems, but Jesus, what a jerk. You've lost the election on that. You don't have the luxury of Marcus Aurelius in your way out of how people feel about you. And I don't know, like it's Pierre doesn't come across as someone who's comfortable in his skin. He doesn't come across as someone who's comfortable playing the role of serious leader. He comes across as comfortable when he's out there fighting the good fight and challenging people. And I think that's just who he is, and he has to lean into that. And that's my pitch for coming on the line. Come on, Pierre.
There will be no fluffing, but
There'll be no fluffing. But it would be a good time. All right. On that note, we want to talk about the Globe and Mail and our favorite ambassador.
We sure do.
We'll sure do.
In a moment. Jen has clipped a bunch of segments from a Globe and Mail column that I'm going to narrate and she's going to respond to. So it's going to be scintillating content. Readtheline.ca, like and subscribe.
Today's episode of the Line Podcast is brought to you by Engage. Knocking doors wins elections. Make it happen with the Engage canvassing app. Your volunteers will be ready to go after moments of training. No complicated setup, just scan a QR code, open Engage, and go knock doors. Every contact syncs instantly with your campaign HQ. You'll see who's supporting you, where your canvassers are, and which issues matter most. Municipal elections are coming to BC and Ontario. Be ready. Visit GoKnockDoors.ca and get started with Engage.
Hey, Matt. So I'm going to start this segment by noting that you and I are not high-minded people. We're not good people.
No, we're trash.
We're trash. I'm a human trash panda. You're a human trash panda. We've found our place in the ecosystem and we've made peace with it. So when we get a really good, petty media story, we're here for it. We're locked in to this. So this week, we got one of those because there was a Cathal Kelly hockey column. Oh, this is going to be so Canadian. Are you ready for this? There was a Cathal Kelly hockey column in the Globe and Mail in which he tore apart the U.S.A. gold medal winning hockey team for their boorish antics and behavior and the degree to which they had allowed themselves to become political props for the Trump administration. And we're going to get into Cathal Kelly columns in general, I think, in this segment. But there were two things that really apparently were very offensive to the U.S. ambassador, Pete Hoekstra. Now, we've spoken about Pete Hoekstra on this column before. You and I have very differing opinions about this individual. My opinion is
I want him mic'd up all the time.
No, my opinion was this is a person who probably shouldn't be speaking in public for the sake of U.S.-Canada relations. Your position is more like, I want all of Canadians to really lock into everything this man says and does so that they have
Clockwork Orange style, eyes pried open,
better understanding of what's happening in the geopolitical scenario, the situation that we're in. So Mr. Hoekstra sends the Globe and Mail a formal request for an apology on the grounds that this Cathal Kelly column was effectively dehumanizing, made note and said that these hockey players were like monkeys, which Kelly's column did, and implied that they were unintelligent. And the Globe responded to this request for an apology with quite the article. So look, bit of context here. Cathal Kelly saying that these people were like monkeys. I think that if the players had been mostly black, I think that would have been an inappropriate metaphor. However, in the non-racialized context here, he was using an animal metaphor, not necessarily a particularly sophisticated or a clever one, but I think it's a stretch to make the claim that this was some kind of dehumanizing effort on the behalf of the Globe and Mail to undermine the basic humanity of the U.S.A. gold medal hockey team. Secondly, I think that probably a little bit more context is required in understanding is that, Cathal really laid into the behavior and the sort of thuggish, jockish behavior of some of these people, but I didn't really read that as a specific tack on the USA men's hockey team as much as I said what I read there was Cathal Kelly lays into hockey culture generally. That's kind of his whole shtick. And I read a lot of the critiques that he was writing as more of a critique of hockey players and their jockish thuggishness in general than specifically labeled at the USA hockey team. So the Kelly column didn't land for me as being particularly interesting, right? This is pretty much his thing. What was unusual was for an ambassador to ask local media for an apology for a hockey column. That's extremely rare. And the Globe responded to this request by writing a news article about it. And Matt, I really think that there's a very specific, someone who went to school in Toronto and worked at the Globe and Mail as an intern and things like that. Laurentian elites have a way of expressing themselves that maybe doesn't fully come across to people who haven't been inculcated in that culture. And so I've highlighted 4 quotes from this Globe and Mail column. And Matt, as our resident Laurentian elite, I would like you to read these quotes. And then I am, as the non-Laurentian elite Albertan, am going to translate them for people so that they can understand what the Globe and Mail is really trying to communicate through this highly professional journalistic story. Can we do that?
I will play this game, but I have 2 points I want to make.
Okay.
Actually, 1 point I want to make. Sports journalism is really interesting because some of the, like, I've always thought some of the best writers in journalism are sports writers. Some of the worst writers in journalism are also sports writers. It's a really weird place where if you're really good at sports journalism, you are a must read to me. If you're terrible at sports journalism, I will never read you. And I'm not going to make any specific comment about any specific columnist, except to say I did not read Mr. Kelly's column.
Very good. Noted. And as someone who has no attachment to the sports ball at all, and this is a massive cultural blind spot to me, noted. Secondly, make your other point.
Well, the other point simply is that I will be, so just for clarity, these aren't from the column. These are from the Globe's response, right?
These are from the Globe's response. Okay. So
right.
So there's a specific thing that the Globe is trying to communicate in its response to this request for an apology.
Okay, so there was the column, the ambassador responded, and what I'm about to read you are quotes from the ambassador's response.
Yes, and you're going to read them in your best Laurentian consensus, downtown Toronto, snobbish effete voice as possible. And I'm going to bird-explain. I'm going to bird-explain these quotes. Okay.
I'm going to normie-explain it. Here we go.
I'm going to normie-explain. Okay.
Pete Hextra said the column by Cathal Kelly, published online last Wednesday and in print on Thursday under the headline, "The State of the Union was a zoo, and the Team USA, the monkeys," left him disappointed and outraged.
Okay, so what's crucial to the subtext that's crucial to understand in that quote is that a significant portion of that quote was highlighted and linked directly to Cathal Kelly's column. So what is being communicated by the choice to link directly to Cathal Kelly's column was read Kelly's column yourself just so that you can see how crazy this is.
Many, many years ago.
That was a passive-aggressive link is what that was.
When I was comment section editor at the National Post many, many years ago, a political staffer complained about something we had published and wanted a rebuttal. And I said, I will be happy to publish your rebuttal alongside the quotes you're objecting to, your call. And they withdrew the request. So
there you go. That's what's happening here. That's what's happening here. Okay, number 2.
Good. Quote number 2. And again, this is from the Globe and Mail. The response. Some of the assertions, such as hockey culture's pack mentality and players' lack of interest in literature, are common fare for Mr. Kelly. I was saying a minute ago that I had not read this particular column.
Okay, no, allow me to bird-explain this. Yes, Mr. Kelly is a weenie, but he's our weenie. I'm going to go wait. Yes, Mr. Kelly is a weenie, but he's our weenie. And by complaining about our weenie, you're making yourself into a much bigger weenie. How am I doing?
I get up in the morning and I grab the paper and my cup of Earl Grey and I think to myself, see how the sports ball went last night. You know what I also need injected into that? Literature.
Also, real deep and incisive commentary about hockey culture's pack mentality and players' lack of interests in literature.
I just want to know who won.
Yep, there you go.
All right.
Okay, number 3.
Number 3. In a statement, Mr. Walmsley, publisher of the Globe, right?
He's editor-in-chief.
Okay, I wasn't sure he was publisher editor. Okay. In a statement, Mr. Walmsley said of Mr. Kelly's column, Strong opinion is a hallmark of independent journalism, and sometimes along the way that leads to reader disappointment and offense.
Get
I can
fucked.
translate that.
Yeah, get fucked.
Yeah, I was going with fuck off instead of get fucked, but yes.
And then the coup de grace. The coup de
All right.
grace, Matt.
Quote number 4. The Globe sent Mr. Huckster's office a series of questions on Tuesday, including what consequences he envisioned if the Globe does not publish an apology, and when the U.S. Embassy in Ottawa had last requested an apology from a Canadian media outlet. Get fucked, part 2?
I'm going to go with, who the fuck do you think you are? Get fucked. Like, there's something so perfectly passive-aggressive about this column. I just think it really is peak Canadiana here. And I got to be honest with you, Matt, after reading this and enjoying talking about it on Twitter for a little bit, I have to come around to your position on our U.S. Canada ambassador, Pete Huckster. He's growing on me. I like him. I couldn't name another U.S. Canada ambassador. I can name this guy. And he's producing for me, man. He's giving. And I like it.
Bitching about Globe and Mail sports columns might be the first diplomatically deft thing the U.S. Embassy has done in terms of reaching out to the Canadian population.
Look, I want him to take this energy and I want him to offend Quebec. I want him to make some really strong commentary about pure lane nationalism in Quebec. If he can get condemned by the National Assembly in his first year in office, that's legend tier now. I'm committed. I'm here with him.
This is such a certain distinctions. We've already joked like 3 times this podcast how old we are.
Mm-hmm.
A future generation, you know what, not even a future generation, a currently young reader, an adult who is interested in the news and is informed, will probably never have the experience that you and I had and that millions of other Canadians had as readers of getting their information from a single source, or maybe 2, that is segmented into topic area sections. Think of the old newspapers: news, business, arts, sports. That's not the way media is consumed anymore. So I don't know if the younger generation is ever going to appreciate how every newspaper basically was always known for being very, very good at something and very, very bad at something else.
Yeah, you didn't go to the Toronto Star for the business reporting.
You did not go to the Globe for the sports columns. And I don't know if the U.S. ambassador and his staff realize that. But I also think a degree of strategic incoherence now seems to be underwriting a lot of U.S. foreign policy. But I'm not convinced picking fights with local sports columnists is strategically incoherent for the U.S. Because I think one of the things we've consistently misunderstood about what the ambassador in Ottawa is doing is he's not here to make us happy. He's keeping the White House happy. And this is something I just don't know if Canadians have figured it out. Where we're looking at Huckster going, why is he doing these things? He's not doing it for us. Coming here and flipping us off is how he pleases the boss down in D.C.
Okay,
the sooner we figure that out, the better off we'll be. But
here's where I think this is strategically unwise on his part. And this is where I'm getting serious. Although he has grown on me. Taking a piece out of Cathal Kelly is hilarious, and I'm kind of here for it. But here's the thing. Does the White House think this makes them look strong or impressive?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Because it doesn't.
I know.
Like, if you're going for, we won't take no shit no more, we are the strong, robust, masculine man culture here to go after you woke Chi-Com gynocracy Canada, nothing about this is serving strength.
Special forces raid against Venezuela, B-2 bomber strikes on Tehran, angry letter to Globe and Mail sports section. The trifecta.
No, we're going to take our shot against Cathal Kelly for using, a monkey's metaphor. That's, whoo boy. Okay. I
Look,
mean, it's a choice. It's a choice.
No. Here I am.
As someone who needs the content, I'm enjoying the choice. This is fantastic for me.
Let's be serious just for a minute. I know
Do
it's
we
hard.
have to be?
It's late in the podcast. We're both getting goofy. I think Jen needs to go have lunch. Her blood sugar is dipping.
It is, actually. You can tell that already. God, you know me too well. But the old folks' home, the columnist old folks' home is going to be hilarious. It's going to be lit.
I'll be sitting in the room.
They're going to put it, there's going to be like one of those fake dementia communities where they put us in front of like fake news. Yeah, fake microphones attached to nothing. We're going to start fighting. It'll be great.
We'll think we're podcasting, and then a nurse will show up, look at Jen, and then bring her an applesauce cup.
It's like your blood sugar's getting too low here, honey. Yeah.
They'll just keep checking my pulse because I will have fallen asleep.
That's good.
Here's my actual.
You fall asleep and I'll keep fighting. That's good. I'll carry it. We can do it.
A huge amount of megaverse communication is entirely inward focused, where capital is and this is not unique to the right wing. Like this, in fact, I actually think the left got bad at this first. You and I watched years ago people become famous, or Twitter famous maybe, on the left by being obnoxiously rude.
Yes, I was one of those people.
Not always. But look, there are entire people whose entire truck and trade was saying mean things about the establishment, right? Mega has just adopted that. And being someone who is outspokenly critical of the woke or professors or the hosts of The View or Globe and Mail sports columnists is how you end up being an ambassador under President Donald Trump, or apparently running Homeland Security as acting director and running the FBI. Once you've got the jobs, though, you got to keep them.
Yeah,
you got to keep serving up that homegrown audience more of the same.
The tragedy of all of this is the degree to which I don't think a lot of these people understand that they're communicating weakness, not strength. Right? That's the actual tragedy. It's not that the Americans picked a strong man, okay? It's that the strong man they picked was so patently fragile. That's, I think, the actual horrible, ironic tragedy of stuff like this. You're the most powerful nation on earth. You have the luxury of not giving any shits about a Cathal Kelly column. I don't give a shit. No, none of us have to give a shit about a Cathal Kelly column. Sorry, Cathal, but like
I've gone 43 years without.
Right.
You know what? Yeah, Jan, you're right, but I'm just going to describe it a little bit differently. What we're looking at, I put this in very grand terms. I'm going to little wrench in this. You might have to bird explain it in a minute.
I'll do my best.
This is the information ecosystems decoupling. We're not in a shared information space anymore where people give a shit about opprobrium from sort of the broad spectrum of society, right? And I'm not trying to do rose-colored glasses. I always know there have been assholes and stuff, but once upon a time, there was kind of one information ecosystem. You had the same TV shows, you had the same radio shows, you had the same magazines, you had the same newspapers. And if you epically shat the bed, you'd be banished. You'd be gone. You couldn't just go from here to there. We're now in an era where the population, probably a bit more in the United States, but I think Canada's heading that way. You can be incredibly famous and successful and rewarded for behaving a certain way in a performance aimed at 30% of the population that makes you untouchable in the other 70%. But the problem is, as long as that 30% is monetized, you're fine. You have a thriving career. You buy the boat. You have the mountain retreat. You take nice vacations. 70% of the population thinks you're a clown. But you found your tribe and you play to them, and it can work. And I think that way civilizational collapse lies, like we said in the second segment. I'm the pessimist compared to you on this one. But this is new. 30 years ago, if you had a completely brain dead public statement or a gaffe and you lost your perch at the Globe, the Star wouldn't touch you, and neither would Maclean's, and neither would the Financial Post. These days, if you get fired from the Star, the National Post probably wants to hire you.
So, but I guess what I'm struggling with here is openly displaying your cultural insecurity in this way in a foreign context.
Because it plays well to that 30%.
Because that plays well to the 30%. It just opens you up to this weakness that can then be used against you. Like, it's not hard for me to imagine a scenario where I'm, trying to say, well, where are the Americans' weaknesses and how can I play them to my advantage? One of the ways that I would say Canadians can play American weakness to their advantage is, if we want to get really ruthless about this and inhuman, Machiavellian about this, the more countries America invades right now, the better we are in Canada. The more extended, protracted, messy quagmires that America's military and political forces find themselves defending in the Middle East, Cuba, Latin America, speaking Kristi Noem, the less bandwidth they have to pay attention to us and our bullshit. And that buys us time. It buys us time to make the types of internal changes that we need to make in order to be more resilient. So they've by showing their bellies in this way, and I do think this is a show of the belly, what they're doing is they're teaching us how to play them. And that's where I think that the missed communication is coming. Christ, if I just wanted to keep Hawkstraw off my back, it would be like seeding the most offensive anti-American columns throughout the national media. And I would be using that as a kind of a controlled opposition strategy to keep him off my back about the stuff that I don't want the ambassador paying attention to, because I know that he'll lose his shit over the small, petty cultural details. Like that would be the strategy that I'd be formulating against the Americans as a result of this. So I don't understand why they don't actually recognize that what they're doing here is a show of weakness, not strength. And I don't understand why they don't understand the degree to which they're just demonstrating, or they're just giving us the tools to outmaneuver them. Right? I don't, that's where I don't get the thought process here.
I think the incentives are so broken, they don't care.
Maybe.
It's anyone operating in the megaverse has personal incentives, and they do not necessarily align with national incentives, and I don't think they care.
Well, that strikes me as an institutional problem. It needs to be addressed.
Remind me again, which one of us is more pessimistic about the U.S.?
Well, for the sake of argument, it'll be you for now. We'll see how we feel next week. And on that note...
What's the name of that Texan guy you're hot on right now?
What, James Tallarico?
Yeah, okay, him.
I like him.
So...
Well, no, wait, we can't get into that because I've got to go pick up my daughter from school.
When?
Like in
now?
2 minutes. Yeah, like now.
Okay, the 30-second version of it?
Okay.
Have you seen the Republicans are now surfacing all the weird things he said about, being white and stuff?
Uh-huh.
That's the left-wing version of MAGA going out and picking a fight with a Globe and Mail sports columnist. It was intended to build clout and credibility with 30%, and it looks really stupid to the remaining 70%. That's
right. No, I don't think that Tallarico's immune to playing this game. Like I get it. I mean, some of the stuff that he said on transgender stuff is looks stupid to mainstream audiences. Yeah. I get it. I understand that it is a game, but he had to say it to win the thing. Yeah. I understand the game. I understand the system and how it works. I just think that, if you can still manage to put decent human... Firstly, I've said this in the comment section of that article I wrote this week about this. And that is, I don't need someone to agree with everything I say to recognize that they're a good person. Right? But that's a mentality that we just need to adopt and a norm we need to adopt. I'm not going to agree with everything someone says. But I do think he is fundamentally a good person. And I think that takes us to a better place than if we are just electing people who are overtly corrupt and criminal. Yeah. Like, I don't think that's a hard bar. Like, somebody says something I disagree with on transgender issues versus impeached, or, dated one of his aides who subsequently lit herself on fire, which was another subplot of the Texas primaries. Like,
I actually had to go Google that because I thought you were being flippant, but no, it turns out a woman did self-immolate.
Literally did that. So like when these are your A/B tests, I don't know what to tell you here, man. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day, and I have to go.
www.readtheline.ca. Like and subscribe. Do not self-immolate, and do not read the Globe and Mail sports section.